In this video, I wanted to go over my TPO settings, TPO chart guide in general, going over how I use them, more so how I use them in particular to trading Bitcoin and a few other assets, rather than just the basic walkthrough of TPO charts. I'll talk you through my specific use cases, what I find useful, what I don't, what I check on a daily basis, and what I don't as well, and diving into that case. So obviously, TPO stands for time, price, opportunity. It is based on time. Okay, so rather than your generic volume profiles that you're used to seeing, for those that don't know, these profiles are actually built upon time. It's built to show you where price has spent the most time for any given day or any given period in this case, because this is a daily TPO chart, but you can get weekly, monthly to show you over those specific time periods as well. But I will be focused on the daily today. I will dive over weekly, monthly, and also sessions as well. But yeah, generally I look at the daily on a routinely basis. The settings I'm using are 30-minute, built on a 350 ticks. Okay, and I'll also walk you through what it's like on TradingView, because TradingView as well, you're gonna have to adjust settings there as well if you do want to look at it through there. But I'm using Exo charts right now. Okay, and yeah, we're on the 30-minute 350 tick on the daily. So moving on from that, really, what is a TPO chart? Why is it built? If we're just to actually show the clusters of this, okay, what you can do in here is if double click on a profile, expand cluster, and you can see how the 30-minute candles are building the TPO profile across time, across the period of a day. And then once you collapse it, if you want to let me collapse it, it collapses it into a singular profile, so you can see exactly where price spent the most time of the day, rather than this more expanded out view, right? It collapses it into a profile, so you can see how it's built. Right, so at each given price level, you can see it will collapse it alongside into a profile view. So for those that didn't know how it was built, and again, I would recommend going and watching another video if you don't understand how TPO charts are built, because there are lots of videos out there. I don't intend to just repeat those ones, and you can go watch those, because the basic theory of how they're built is very, very common. So moving on from that, POCs on my template, and again, if you want the template, this exact template I'm using, it is within the free read-only Discord. Just click the top link in the description, click the free read-only Discord, and join it from there. Okay, so yeah, we've got POCs, the grey one in this case being the volume point of control, the red one being the time. So why do I have both? So for example, the red one is the time point of control, where the most time has been spent throughout the day. The grey one being where the most volume has been spent throughout the day. I'll also hide the candles real quickly here. Okay, because time and volume might have a discrepancy. Where price spent the most time is not necessarily where it's been spending the most volume, or where not necessarily where the most volume has been transacted. So in this case here, and this is what you generally describe as a discrepancy, where if we just turn on the candles, actually a bit silly to turn them off so quickly, but you can see price actually spent the most time down here yesterday. Price then saw a move to the upside with actually volume point of control coming in near the highs. Now, I didn't actually plan for this to be the case, but what is this telling me? Actually, that volume is seeing acceptance towards the upside upon a break of a range, because you have all this sideways price action, okay, where, you've got the time point of control, and then over time, the volume point of control shifted up here, where it's not spent the most amount of time, but we're actually seeing a lot more acceptance up here due to seeing that volume POC shift from, down here to up here, okay? That is what you generally want to see upon like these generally trend continuations, in my opinion. So what this is necessarily telling me is that this current trend is strong, at least from yesterday. The current trend is strong due to the volume POC shifting towards the upside rather than staying towards down here. That is really what it's telling me. These traders are trapped. We're seeing this move to the upside. That is what a general discrepancy is. In most profile cases, you'll see them literally on top of each other together. For example, here, volume and time, you don't even see it because they're on top of each other. It won't do that, but you can see here again together. It's only when you get these big discrepancies that I'm interested. Again, these can also be used as SR levels. So this is, I'll bring this up as well. Obviously, we've got volume and time here, right? And I'm saying the volume point of control is shifted towards the upside. We've still got the time point of control down here, and it doesn't mean there is no volume down here. I always hear people get this confused, in my opinion at least, that because the volume point of control is shifted, and the time point of control is down here, great, the more volume is coming in up here, but that doesn't mean that there is no volume coming in where this time point of control is. And you can view it by obviously looking at, for example, on the right hand side of my actual template here, I've got the volume profile in hollow. So I can see here, for example, where the most volume is coming in. And you can see it's still a high volume though. There's still a decent amount of volume coming in here, just not as much as you saw the breakout and seeing acceptance above here. Okay. If this was a fake out of some sort, you generally would want to see a kind of like a drop off in volume as you move above the highs. Or it depends on, each individual scenario. Okay, so that's covering the POCs, discrepancies with that, looking at the volume profile, because you might have, and also again, like just to bring this up, you might have a case where there is a lot of time spent somewhere, but the volume profile is showing like really, really low volume. Like there is not even a high volume node there. So that's something to take into consideration as well. Looking at the two there, the volume profile itself, the POCs, discrepancies, and the actual time, time profile itself, okay, the market profile itself, rather than just making assumptions. You can compare the two, look at them, and because generally, right, if you are seeing a trend, you want to see these two stick. But if you see these two, peeling away from each other, having a discrepancy, that is that, you can start take away some takeaways from that one, in terms of the strength of the trend or weakness in the trend, through looking at that. And generally, I place more, I always get this question. I've got some frequently asked questions I wanted to run through, but point of control, generally, POCs in general, I generally place more weight on the volume, point of control, in my opinion at least. But again, like I said, if the time point of control is down here, I'll go, okay, there is a high volume node backing the time point of control. I'm still going to be aware of this level down here. So that's that. Single prints and ledges. So I'll go over this now. Most people look at single prints in its entirety form. So what is a single print? First of all, a single print is where you get one block, a row of one blocks on the market profile where price has spent very little time, generally just one 30-minute candle in this case, in the settings that I've got on the chart. But you can see we've got 4 blocks here, 1, 2, 3, 4 of just single TPO blocks, and you can see where that was built from, was right here, where you got 1, 2, 3, 4 built here, causing this inefficiency to come in play. And you can see I've only got one rail on the chart. So if we go into settings, chart settings, and then go to TPO, single prints, I've got this to only show the first print range. I specifically added this setting before, and I'll dive into this now, because if I unselect this, you'll see the actual whole single print efficiency. But I like to have this enabled because I like to see it get filled. I also would place emphasis. So what this is showing you is once the single print is filled, it's showing you the direct level. If you look over to the right hand side, that direct specific level, okay, rather than the whole block here, it's showing you the final level once it's filled to be aware of. So what I would then do is I'd then go, okay, well, 43067.5, let's go to trading view, 43067.5, and I'll just mark that out literally directly. Wherever that is, like here, I'd mark that out directly and be okay, that's a level of interest potentially if it's got any further confluences there, right? So that is why I mark this out rather than having the whole block itself. But single prints for me, not only am I looking at the last level, I'm looking at the very first touch and move into them as well. So like, for example, here I would go, look, this is a ledge almost, but like the first move into a single print. So I go like here, and then you can go, look, well, this is your last low before the single print, then you got the first touch into the single prints. This is a level of interest for me, big level of interest. So even on if we are to go to training view real quick, you can see this is the first move into those single prints. Even if we just go on the 30-minute, beyond this low, and obviously into that level that we just said, 43.67, you've got this like kind of single print pocket here. Right, this is like the whole pocket, and I've only really aligned the final, the level once the single print's been filled. But you can see we've got this kind of gap here. I'm interested in the first touch and also once it's filled. Anything in between is not of interest to me. And although in this case it's a small gap, generally the gap and the single print will be much larger, and then you can focus on separating the first, the initial first touch into the level and once it's been filled. Anything in between, I'm not interested in trading. Okay, that's important to note in terms of single prints. You also get ledges. So, I mean, this is something I focus on quite a bit, where you have these. You can see here where there's a ledge and there's like there's a 5 block, and it just instantly drops off a cliff. I'm interested in these, for potential runs of liquidity as well. These are great potential, areas to find resting liquidity, in my opinion, that I actually placed on my levels of interest. So the way I kind of do my TPO charts, and I may be going through it sporadically here to an extent, not really kind of, I've got it written out, but what I'll do is in the morning, I go through my routine checklist. Is there any single print ledgers I'm interested in? Where are the single prints? Poor highs, poor lows, which we'll cover in a second. POC discrepancies, all of this stuff I cover. And then I go, okay, these are my levels of interest for the day. I've extracted all of that info from the TPO chart. Now I just go over to my basic trading view chart, and I kind of go from there. But yeah, I mark out any sort of ledgers that are of interest to me. Ledgers being, this is an okay one here. It's nothing extravagant. But we have, if we just turn off the candles, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, followed by a bit, a drop off in terms of a cliff to the next one, right? And that's something, how do I define a drop off and a cliff is down to my own discretion. Okay. And I'm comfortable saying that. And that's just down to me marking that. You could be like, well, it's when you have a 5 block and it drops down, to a 3 block, or like a 10 block and it drops down to a 3 block. It's down to your discretion, because this is, how many blocks is this? This is an 8 dropping down to a 3. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 drops down to a 3. That's the cliff there. Is that 8 to 3, right? Is that cliff? So just a bit of something there to mention, but mainly I'm interested in those single prints, the first touch and the last touch. The first touch for me, evermore being really, really useful, to find those levels of interest, at least lately. So poor highs and poor lows, it makes sense to go over those now as well, are essentially where you have and we'll go over buying tails, selling tails, are where you have one or two or more blocks at the bottom or top of a profile. At the bottom, they're poor lows. So you've got here 2 blocks, poor low at the bottom of a profile. This is a poor low on the chart. Price has not spent a lot of time there, spent a bit too much time there. And generally you want to see price being bought up fairly quickly with like one wick with a wick almost. And there is no real wick here. It's just 2 bottom ending profile, double bottom on the 30-minute, essentially, if you want to call it that. But these generally, I would expect these to be revisited within 3 days. I've got a video covering that if you want to go back to I'll link it as well. But it's basically called How to Form Bias, How I Form My Daily Bias. Go watch that, where I cover this. But 2 or more blocks, I expect this to be revisited within 3 days. I've got specific stats to this, and I've been continuing to keep those. I've got previous stats as well. Go back and watch that if you want. But this is something I look at as well. So yeah, when you see this, I'm expecting these to be revisited. But not only that, I'm also looking at this for potential runs of liquidity, because you could get an SFP of this level before then seeing it move to the upside or whatnot. This is the type of way I'm looking at it. So I'm looking at it in terms of continuation, revisitation, and a daily bias almost, because obviously in this case it didn't happen so far, but you'd be downtrending, poor low, sideways, next day, continuation. It's a very common theme, especially, when you're looking for further upside as well. It works in both ways to know not when to, especially in this case, I did actually say, I'm expecting lower prices, and that's due to this. And that doesn't mean, I'm going to take a trade necessarily off this. But it's giving me some sort of continuation bias if I was to be in a short, for example, on this day or whatever it may be. That is where I'm using these poor highs and poor lows. Now, what happens if we don't have a poor high or poor low? We have a row like this, where it's like a buying tail, for example. I don't have them marked out in this case, but you can go chart settings, TPO, tail, single prints and tails, and then you can enable buying tails, etc. And you can see them here. Now, I don't look at these too much. I don't enable them because I know where they are. You can just see, if they're at the bottom or top of a profile when you have continuous row of single prints, what's going on. But when you have that, are they all generally good? No, because I like to, especially when you see like a really large one. Okay, so what I mean by that is, I'll try to find an example here. But when you have like a massive row of inefficiencies, God, I can't find one. A massive, so you've got a massive row at the. I don't need to, show you an example, but you've got a massive, buying tail or selling tail where it's like 12 or more blocks. From my testing, at least 12 or more blocks, and you leave that behind. I'm expecting that to be filled. Well, what that is essentially, it's just a large wick, and I've mentioned many times before that I'm not the biggest fan of seeing massive wicks on the TPO. Even here, for example, you've got a massive wick to the downside. That's leaving that there on the day. All you do is you rally back up. It, in my opinion, offers a short trade to target back down the wick fill of that whole move. So, and even if that's not happening today, it will happen the next day, next day. I don't like seeing massive wicks. To me, they're just, even here, massive wick, filled, And that's why, buying tails, selling tails, they're great, but they've got to be a certain size. They can't be too big. Otherwise, I'm just looking for it to be filled at the end of the day. And I'm going to be playing off of that bias. None of these things are actually triggering me to take a trade. They're actually just looking at it in terms of like the daily bias and going it from like that. So it's literally just about forming a bias based upon, is there a massive TPO buying tail on the day? If there is, look for it to get filled. Is there a level of interest which allows me to short to target to the bottom of that wick? And that is how I'm playing it. I'm not just going, there's a massive buying tail, I need to short now. That's not how it works. I actually play it really methodically. I have my levels of interest, and from there I then go on from there. So hopefully that makes sense in terms of the buying tails, selling tails. Look at it from there, and go from there. The other things I wanted to cover just very briefly. So I've covered single prints, POC discrepancies, ledges, and poor highs, poor lows in brief detail like that. And again, I wanted to just say on the poor highs, poor lows, these are level. I wanted to emphasize that these can be levels of interest. So, especially like here where you've got this low and then there's like a gap in price action to the next swing lows, which are like down here. That's a gap in price action, resting liquidity. I'm pretty sure you all know me for that one. Go back and watch that. But this is now plays even more emphasis on this being a potential level to see an SFP from. I like seeing that. So that's how I'm using that type of confluence. Yeah. Initial balance. I'm covering this because it's part of, generic TPO theory. I don't look at this very much. Not really. I'll explain to what it is. It's literally the first hour of price action, 2 30-minute candles. You can expand it if you want, I do use initial balance actually within session POCs, which I'll discuss in a second. But generically, I don't look at this. It's the first hour of price action. It can generally, most people say, tell you what the setup is for the day. I won't go on a rant and rave about this, but I don't look at it for that personally. And I'll cover why in another video or another thread completely in detail. But personally for me, I'm not going to sit here and just go over a generic, it makes sense to look at initial balance. No, because I don't. And you won't really hear me talk about that, at least right now. But we've got that. Other thing to note, what is useful for me to look at, I have this at the top here. It's a bit small, but ACR, rotation factor, delta volume. I look at ACR probably the most, literally because I have a routine where if I've got a level of interest, right, what's the ACR on the day? So if my level of interest right now is this low here, for example, right, and the ACR today is 165 on average, okay, 164 roughly. Well, I'd set my alert $160 away, so I have got like a 30-minute roughly grace period to get to the chart and know what's going to occur. So I've got that kind of gap there. It's not just alert on the dot. Okay, so that's why it's important to have that in check. Right, in terms of the ACR, and I don't really check anything else. Daily, weekly, monthly. In routine, I check out the PO. So again, just to recover on some things, I still got some things to go over, but POCs, single prints and ledges, poor highs, poor lows, those are all in my routine in terms of, are there any naked point of controls? Are there any single prints I want to be aware of in terms of like ledges, first touches into single prints? Are there any POC discrepancies? Are there any poor highs and poor lows? And again, I'm looking at this on the, I don't look at, so on the weekly and monthly, I literally only look at point of controls and high volume nodes, nothing else. Just so we're completely aware of this, nothing else. Point of controls, and not much. All the other theory I'm literally apply strictly to the daily. And on the session POCs, so if we want to load this up, give it a second. I'm literally only looking at point of controls on here as well, and merging these together where needed. But in general, the daily and what I've explained there in terms of like poor highs, poor lows, wick fills, all of that stuff, I'm really applying to, this and the daily TPO. It makes sense to also show you my trading view setup. So if we just go over to here before I forget this, I've got like a few different settings. So if we go to here, set it to 5. I've got actually, it's like, I call it a simple setup, but it's just your TPO charts, 30-minute, and you can see from here, high to low. I've got, if I double click here, inputs, 350 ticks per row. So it's got the exact same settings as XO, but you can get it on TradingView, and I use it where I needed. And then if I change it to 6, it's literally just got the volume profile, because, if you want to be checking discrepancies, you can't do that if you just got that one there, just showing you the time. And then also, it's actually got by the way, this one here, so the actual time, TPO indicator, just type in TPO within the indicator section on it, trading when you come up. It does have this here, but I don't like this one. I don't like using that. If we go to 7, I've actually created one which is like all in one. Volume profile, TPO, previous day levels. I still mark out my previous day levels manually. But if you want to emulate exactly what I've been looking at here from Exo to TradingView, you can completely do that with periodic volume profile tool and the TPO profile tool and a few other levels if you want. But it's very, very useful. So hopefully this covers everything. I don't know if you could tell my throat's a bit gone today, been gone the last few days. But I appreciate all of you guys. Hopefully you found this valuable.